So apparently, little old New Zealand is spying on Russia. Wait, what? More on that soon. Also, National rules out the Opportunities Party, got it out, as a coalition partner. You see why I tripped up. Finally, the Greens launched their campaign and what that says about major parties. You're with Maxim Institute's The Select Committee, the politics podcasts that allow, podcast, singular, that's 2 in a row now, that allows you to not watch or listen to any others. I'm joined by Marianne Spurdle, our research manager, and Thomas Scrimger, researcher. Great to see you guys. Let's rip into this. This is just like blows my mind in some sense. A man has been arrested in Russia on accusations of spying for New Zealand, and this guy, and this is Russia's Federal Security Service, the FSB, said that this guy had actually approached the SIS to work for them. This is just this seems like unbelievable in some way, Thomas.
Well, it's certainly a very fascinating story. One of my ongoing interests is when you get these news stories that come out about something related to espionage and you get the official no comments, and then we just never hear about it again. So I'm really excited to see if this is one of those stories. I think back often, we think about this in terms of what happens to New Zealand. Very famously, there was a spy station in Auckland that was alleged to be sort of from the Chinese state, that they were operating essentially a police station to surveil ethnic Chinese residents of New Zealand. And that kind of comes out. There's a news story about it. It's not kind of fringe, but then there's just sort of never anything further.
Yeah, it's just like the spray of mist, and then it disappears. And just FYI, Defence Minister Chris Penk has said, I cannot possibly comment, and he would not say whether or not New Zealand had ever spied on other countries. But isn't that what grown-up countries do? Anyway, the Prime Minister had also said, I don't comment on security intelligence issues. I'll encourage you to talk directly to the SIS. I can hear the hiss of the aerosol going and the spray evaporating, Thomas.
Oh, yeah, certainly I think we will not get anything interesting deliberately out of the politicians. There's been some strong discipline, and those are the Christopher Luxon and Chris Penk are the relevant ministers, but members from the opposition as well have stoically refused to say anything interesting. But I would say that if New Zealand was in fact spying on Russia, and it's a big if, we don't know anything, it's not like Russia has never spied on New Zealand. My favourite example from New Zealand history is that Sir Bob Harvey himself alleged that Vladimir Putin had spent time in New Zealand. Vladimir Putin used to work for the KGB, and he worked in New Zealand briefly as a shoe salesman for Bata shoes. So Vladimir Putin himself may or may not have been a spook here. But then also a major figure in 20th century public policy, a senior public servant, Bill Such. In the 1970s, the Security Intelligence Service prosecuted him for leaking information to the Russians. And he got off from that. He was found, he was not convicted, he was found not guilty. Now, it just means that he had a hobby of sitting on park benches with Russian state officials during rainstorms. But he was not a spy. So, New Zealand and Russia do have a bit of a history here.
Yeah, there's previous engagements, shall we say. What's interesting for this is that, to me, is that this is reflective of a different geopolitical era. And we've harked back to this before, in the sense that this is a time when there is competition between, rather than one dominant figure like the United States geopolitically, there's competition between various actors, China, Russia, perhaps India, etc., United States, and we're seeing that playing out, and New Zealand's a part of that. And it's kind of, in a sense, I was surprised, but not surprised, but I think many Kiwis will be surprised that we do this too, Marianne.
Yeah, well, we did it anyway, if he is ours, which we don't know, and maybe we don't do it as well as others because he got caught. If he is ours, and they're never going to say, so we don't know. But yeah, we can assume that we're playing the game as well. Yeah. Yeah,
that I guess, in a sense, that upsets the narrative that we have about ourselves of being sort of passive players in this wider geopolitical arena. I mean, for example, we are a member of Five Eyes, so you would expect that there would be responsibilities.
Or smaller, not necessarily passive. Yeah.
Yeah. Thomas, any summaries?
Well, yeah, I think you're right. You're onto something there. Where New Zealanders, we like to think of ourselves, like, we don't like to think that we're playing spy games. As much as I think it's cool. New Zealand tends to place a high view on our moral authority as a public voice who doesn't get in the games of sort of the big world, right? We sit there with our conviction and we articulate a more unified approach to world issues. But New Zealand does play in the same games of tradecraft and hard power that other countries do, and it would be strange for us to not think that we do, that we have to kind of realize that, for better or worse, and we don't know what, if anything, this actual operation was, but New Zealand does do this. We have spy bases that intercept communiques as far as they can. We participate in Five Eyes networks, and so it's a real part of the kind of state activity of New Zealand that is worth remembering from time to time.
Yeah, so in a sense, we're perhaps a little less high-minded, a little more divisive, and a bit grubbier than we would like to think. And what's wrong with that? Anyway, let's keep moving. National has ruled out the Opportunities Party as a coalition partner. Now, this signifies to me, number one, clearly they're a problem for National because they're pushing them at arm's length. My question, really, though, because it's interesting, by ruling them out, they're legitimising them in some sense. And in terms of the polling, they haven't quite got there yet. I need to see sort of like 5 to 6%. Thomas, do you think the other thing too is they're saying that they're centrists? Are they really centrists? What's the information here?
Yeah, so I think their polling is now serious. They've gotten over 4% in a number of polls. Obviously, 5% is the threshold they need to meet to get into Parliament because they're very unlikely to win an electorate. So they're polling within seeing distance. They can see land, and that means they are being taken seriously enough that it's significant that National has ruled them out. I think if Top were polling at 1%, National would not have bothered to rule them out. And so then it's an interesting question about, are they centrists? We've talked before about how, from a policy standpoint, they're definitely to the left of New Zealand politics. They're advocating for some fairly significant structural reform of the tax system and increasing benefits essentially to a universal basic income. So not really right-wing policies, so to speak. And also their key personnel tend to be taken from the left, not the right of New Zealand politics. So from substance, it's hard to say that they are a centrist party. But when you look at the polling of people who are saying they're leaning towards Top at the moment, more of them voted for National at the last election in 2023 than any other party. But by the same measure, those people who are looking at voting Top would in general prefer a Labour-led government, not a National-led one, in 2026. So I think what we're seeing here is that kind of squishy middle vote. It's not a big section of the electorate by any means, but it does seem to be a kind of centre in that they are people who voted blue last election but may not want blue to lead next time. It's a really kind of strange mix of views.
Yeah, and I wonder, Marianne, just how much this is impelled by an understanding of policy, or is it the sense that, to me, the Opportunities Party, they present themselves as, we are sensible, we are wise, we're sort of like the protest vote. If you find New Zealand First a bit objectionable, then go with us. I think I said before, it's the person at the party that says, oh, I'm on spirulina tonight because I've been looking at the numbers. Marianne.
Yeah. The squishy middle, I would call more like vibes voters, where they kind of go where they feel like they identify with how a party presents. I don't think they're looking at the policies. So the fact that they're proposing a universal income and other tax measures that, the Green Party's proposals that it recently released, based loosely on Treasury forecasts, but actually completely veering from them. Those taxes, you'd be hard put saying that they break even, but the Green Party actually runs the numbers. And even though the way they calculate it doesn't match the information we have, they still have their modeling and everything. With the Opportunities Party, we don't even see that level of detail. It's just, this is what we would like New Zealanders to have, and New Zealanders who want to vote for them go, that sounds good to me. And nobody's really looking that far under the hood. They just match what the voter feels like they want.
I think it speaks to a sense that tone is really important in politics, and there could be the rise of the Opportunities Party could be produced by a sense of fatigue with saying the naughty thing, truth-telling, the antagonistic populism that other parties are generating. It's like, you know what? Let's tempt. It's actually quite interesting, sort of thinking about the New Zealand character. Do we like the noisy populist, or do we like the sort of quiet, unassuming, professional seeming?
Which we could use more of,
Yeah. Look, for me, okay, I'm not buying it at 4.7 either. I know they're fogging up the window of the 5% margin. Give me 3 polls at 6%, taking care of the margin for error, then get back to me. Okay, finally, the Greens have released their policy. They've basically kicked off their campaign. The slogan is "For all of us," which appeals to New Zealanders because we're egalitarians. We don't like to think Jack is any worse than his master. So I think that's going to resonate. And also a big no thank you, or not just yet, Thomas, to AI data centres. Because I think that's actually an increasingly a populist position in some sense.
I expect it to be very populist. What the Greens have said is they're looking for a 1-year moratorium on new consents for data centres. So the kind of inflection point or the prompt for this is there is the big AI data centre that has been is sort of on its way to being built in Southland. It's certainly passed its approval ratings. And so the Green Party policy is unlikely to impact them. They're saying a 1-year moratorium for any new ones. What's brilliant about it as a form of politics is that it's very unlikely that a new AI hyperscaling data center is going to be proposed and consented in the next year anyway. There aren't that many of these things in New Zealand. So at one level, it hits a sweet spot for you're saying a really strong, popular thing, but doesn't actually require very much of you. It was an interesting feature of Chloe Swarbrick's appearance on Q&A, interviewed by Tova O'Brien, who was filling in for Jack Tame. They spent a lot of time talking about this data center policy specifically, because they are sensing that it does hit something about where a lot of people are thinking. There's a lot of dissatisfaction with data centers. Now, it turns out that they spent a lot of time going back and forth about this idea that data centers turn water to sludge. And that was the phrase that Chloe Swarbrick used, and then Tova O'Brien quibbled about what sludge really meant and whether the word was hyperbole. But I think it was a shame that they played around with what the word meant rather than what was the evidence basis for it. And so certainly what I imagine Swarbrick is drawing on from her advice is that there is a particular allegation about a data center being built in Georgia in the United States, where some houses nearby, their wells have had really brown water coming out of them. And people are saying the data center has done this. And the key kind of just one fact to really keep in mind for what the allegation is that this is an allegation that the building of a data center has damaged some wells, i.e. any form of construction could have done this. There is nothing about a data center specifically that would have caused this. They're purely talking about the construction of a building and putting in an infrastructure. And so in essence, is it true? The facts are a little bit hard to tell from the reporting, but nothing about data centers has caused this water damage in Georgia that is being kind of garbled its way through to Q&A. It's purely something that construction could do. So it's a populist and popular announcement, but does it have a lot of substance? I'm not convinced.
Well, and it does certainly make for some ripping adversarial TV. Let's just take a look at some of that now.
So is it just AI data centres, or is it data centres in general?
Yeah, so we already have dozens of data centres, and of course data sovereignty is incredibly important.
That example you just gave, the Southland hyperscale data centre, that is a data centre, not just an AI data centre.
Yeah, but I think if you were to look at the power consumption here of that AI data centre, the data grid centre down in Southland.
It's AI and data. It's not just an AI data
but it
centre.
is consuming around 280 megawatts of power.
Woo, can't we just all get on? Interesting, I think what's fascinating to me about these minor parties, Marianne, is the diagnosis that they offer about the state of major parties. What's your sense of the Greens campaign kicking off and what that might say about some of the more broad church parties?
It's interesting looking at the numbers for the minor parties, because the rule of thumb was if a minor party went into coalition with one of the major parties, the next election, it would either be out or its numbers would be, way down. Ask Winston Peters for his experiences with that, in and out of Parliament. That's not happened the past 3 years. In fact, both ACT and New Zealand First, especially New Zealand First, are doing particularly well, having gone into coalition. And then you've got a brand new, a reinvented minor party and opposition parties that aren't doing too badly either. So the minor parties are actually evening out the spread between the two major ones. And the numbers that, what did Labour get in 2020? It was
like
just over
51% of the vote.
I don't think we're ever going to see that again. And I don't think it's a specifically MMP thing, because you look at countries that don't have MMP, UK, you look at the US, where there still are two major parties, but you had first the Republican Party kind of fragmenting with the MAGA movement. So for a number of years now, there's been a bit of a divide there, where you've got people wanting it to go two different directions, and now the Democrat Party is having the same kind of wings. So even though there's still kind of a two-party system, there are fractures there that haven't been there before. And in our context, where there were already several camps you could sit in, you're seeing a greater spread among those camps. So I think it's just fracturing in general. And people are, as we become more atomized, choosing their own path in a way that we didn't used to.
I wonder, I know that certainly seems to be a sociological trend in Western democracies. I guess I'm a little bit sad, Thomas, because this is the end of the ability to be in a party where you probably disagree with someone about 30% of the issues, but you can say, oh, look, I'm going to hold my nose and vote anyway, which I think is what we do in democracies. But now it's like, oh, no, this is almost like therapeutic individualism. You have to understand all of me. Oh, you understand all of me. I love you. That seems infantile.
Yeah, I think it certainly is a trend where people are increasingly seeing how they vote as a form of self-expression. And you're right, I think that is reasonably problematic. I mean, in part, that probably tracks along with the sort of the decline of actually becoming members of parties. And in fact, now people vote and perhaps even are very, very active on social media or posting or other forms, but they're not actually part of a membership-driven organization. But my big concern about it is and I think it's just a problem of having a large number of parties, is when you have a civil war within the kind of big two parties, as you say in America, or the UK until recently, where these are big tents and they're fighting. At the very least, you do have to then settle on a kind of a policy platform and then go with it to an election. The problem we have in New Zealand now is because negotiations happen after the election, I can make promises that I know I won't be able to fulfill. And then I can say after the election, look, those promises I knew were too bold. I gave them up in negotiation and I won't be held to them. So it's very easy it's very convenient for a coalition, whether on the left or on the right, for them all to agree in kind of like a theatrical sort of way to kind of stretch out their promises a little bit bigger, because their reason for failing to deliver on them isn't I couldn't deliver on my promise. It's that my coalition partners said no. And it's in everyone's interest to kind of shoot down their coalition partners' worst ideas and then be more reckless themselves in what they promise. So I recognize that people do like minor parties that have a place to play, but I think there is a real risk to what it means for how elections are run going forward.
And by the way, vote for the Select Committee and you will receive a bucket of extra crispy on your doorstep for the rest of your life. Promise. Let's get to Fantasy Beehive, the part of the podcast where we pick the politicians whom we believe will do the best over the coming week, and then we get a serve and a telling off by reality, because it often doesn't work out, or doesn't work out quite as we had hoped. So, Marianne, there's a vibes constituent to it, isn't there? Mm-hmm. Whereby it's so what does the media coverage mean? And Thomas, there's also action within the house.
Yes, so we're trying to track, both what government MPs are doing and what opposition MPs are as well. So we're tracking bills that pass through the various stages of reading. We're asking, we're tracking questions that are asked in the House, and then also our members can write written questions to ministers, and so we track those as well. And each of those, through our patented algorithm, attract a score, and then at the end of the week, those are all totaled up, and we see whose politicians that they drafted had achieved the most, both in the House and in the media.
Interestingly enough, Marianne, you and I both chose Chloe Swarbrick.
Yes.
Tell me why you did.
Oh, I'm going to have to think back all those days. I think I was just looking for names who I thought might be vocal in the media. And I don't know if she was. I think half of it was in Parliament and half of it was media stuff.
Oh, no,
Do
let's
we not look at the points yet?
We're not looking at the points yet.
Remember how many she
Why
got.
you chose? Look, I chose Chloe Swarbrick because she's a great crystallizer. For example, the anti-AI data thing. That's a great resonant policy, and it shows that, or at least position, and it shows an awareness of what's going on. So I think there's political nous there. She's a pretty good speaker, and so I thought, okay, and because increasingly we're in the campaign cycle, I went for Chloe as well. Thomas, who did you pick?
I had Mark Mitchell leading my team. I thought he'd been quiet for a little while, but he's a really strong performer in front of the cameras. He's really good at a stand-up press conference, has a range of portfolios. So I was like, I haven't actually thought about Mark Mitchell recently, but he is a strong performer when he's put in front of a camera. So I thought I'd pick him and see what happens.
So who won?
Well, of those of us sitting here, now we'll say we also have our comms team playing. So, Josiah will be mad if I claim victory.
Then please claim victory.
Well, I got 11 points overall. And so, I thought that was reasonably strong. I will say that Mark Mitchell was my leading scorer, but in part because he got featured in headlines. Now, it wasn't a scandal. He didn't do anything wrong, but he is the Minister in charge of Civil Defence. And there was a major era of civil defence when their website was not working at a time of critical usefulness, and so they've had to kind of go for a mea culpa of, don't worry, our systems are actually all reliable. So Mark Mitchell's name gets mentioned in the headlines, so he gets a media cut through. He didn't do anything wrong, but he also didn't kind of get much light shined on him either way. It's just simply, the minister has expressed his regret that this has happened, but his support for civil defence. So I probably got more media points than were real achievements.
I think, Miriam, we can deduct at least 2 of those points for vibes.
Okay, so we'll call it 9 points overall then.
Yeah. You're still the winner, right?
Well, I don't know. What do you guys get?
I haven't seen them.
Oh,
You've got them in front of you.
I've got them in front of me. Okay, well, Marianne, you got 7 points overall. Okay. So that's not bad. And then Tim is hovering down in the doldrums at 6.
At which point we'll bring this to a close. What an absolute travesty, but we will be back next week with the Select Committee. Now, if you like this, subscribe, and also we are on Sky Channel 83, Politics Wednesday. Be there or be square. See you next week.